This episode is sponsored by World Anvil. World Anvil is an award-winning world building and writing software for people who love to create rich and exciting worlds.
Dungeon crawlers.
We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers, where, wow, you're only going to be hearing two voices this evening because, well, let's just put it this way. Krebs is sitting on a beach in the middle of Jamaica, and you just can't say anything more than that.
The stalwart ones are here.
Yes.
Where we just got snowed upon in Utah. He's enjoying sandy beaches, and we're enjoying gray, slushy snow.
Yes. Yeah, slushy snow. And not the kind that's tasty to eat.
Yeah.
The type you don't want to touch. Anyways, however, it is a new year. It's the first of the year. And because of that, we've got some great and exciting things to talk about. We have a new sponsor for the show, World Anvil, that we'll talk about a little bit later. And we have some exciting content coming your way. Most importantly, we will be interviewing Brandon Sanderson. And
Woo-hoo!
So next episode that you will hear from us will be us talking to Brandon Sanderson and talking about his latest novel in the Mistborn series, The Lost Metal, as well as Secret Project 1 and some writing and other cool stuff that he's been working on. But tonight, or this episode's show, is all about cheesy and gone too soon shows from the 80s and 90s. That is two separate subjects. Really cheesy shows from the 80s and 90s that we enjoyed, or maybe we didn't enjoy, and then shows that were gone too soon that we wish had stayed around. Kind of like Firefly. We kind of wish it would have hung around a little while, but that isn't in that time frame. That definitely
Daniel,
came later.
These can be the same category. These can be cheesy shows that we still wish had lasted a little bit longer than they did. And I think that some of our listeners may feel that way too. When we take the Gone Too Soon, they're going to say, "Oh, but that was such cheese." And I'll say, "Yes, but so are Cheetos, and I can't get enough Cheetos."
Yep, can't have enough Cheetos. And not only that, they purposely make it so their dust sticks to your finger. I learned that. I've been watching, over the Christmas break, I was watching some snack food shows, and they purposely make it so that sticks to your fingers. Because they found in a test group that when they made it so it didn't stick to your finger, people didn't like them. It's weird. People like sucking the cheese dust off their fingers. But anyways.
It stays with you forever, just like the memory of these wonderful TV shows from the 80s and 90s.
Yes. So we talked before the show, and we decided we're going to start with the cheese first, because the cheese is always the topping on first before you get down to the meat of things. So with cheesy, how do you want to go about this? One at a time? Do you want to do one or two?
Let's switch off. You do one, I'll do one.
So I've got my list. I'm going to start from one of the cheesiest, from least cheesiest down to what I thought was the cheesiest. Least cheesiest, but still was a cheesy show from the 80s and 90s, Saved by the Bell. Man, that was just
oh my gosh,
school teen drama with Mark Paul Gosling. Yeah.
Gosler.
Tiffany Amber Thiessen now, and a whole plethora. The theme song got stuck in your head really easy. Mr. Belding was a principal that everyone wished they had because he was such a pushover. And there was just things that were just so far stretched. My high school experience was nothing like that high school experience. Not only that, the giant cell phone that Zach had. I get that back in the day, that's what cell phones look like. But watching that, even now, watching back, I'm like, man, this thing was just crazy. Why did I like this? And I mean, even then I found it cheesy, but now it just doesn't stand up to the test of time. And the cheesy factor is just so much worse.
I just couldn't get over the fact that the voice of Kid is the principal.
You're thinking of Boy Meets World.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
no, you're right.
Yeah, Boy Meets World.
It was
Mr.
some
Feeney.
other.
Yeah, Mr. Feeney was the voice of Kit. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, it's okay.
I got mixed up with that.
But yeah, no, there was Screech and Slater and all those other guys, and then of course the gal that played Jessie ended up like really trying to break away from
Elizabeth Berkley,
that character, and then did Showgirls, and I don't think her career ever recovered from that one.
Did not help.
Yeah. So that's number one on my cheese.
All right,
list.
that's a good pick. My least cheese on this list was Misfits of Science.
Okay.
I loved this show. It was very short-lived, but it had first of all, the theme song was by Cyndi Lauper, who was really popular at the time.
Yeah.
And it had Dean Paul Martin played Dr. Billy Hayes. He's the son of Dean Martin, the Dean Martin, and he was the only one that didn't have powers. His colleague scientist was this really tall African-American guy, Kevin Peter Hall. His character was Elvin Lincoln, and he's so tall. The joke is that his ability, he experimented on himself. His ability is he can shrink down from 7'4" to 11 inches. And then he has to put on some doll clothes that he always carries in his pocket. Usually it was from the Michael Jackson doll that was popular in that era. So he's either wearing Ken clothing from Ken and Barbie or Michael Jackson clothes. And that was great. And then also it had Johnny B. Bukowski, who got struck by lightning, and now he has electricity powers. He can shoot electricity. He can run really fast, but he's weak. If he gets wet, then he gets burnt and short-circuited and loses all of his powers. But the big breakout role was Courtney Cox as Gloria, a telekinetic troubled teenager on parole. And it was just, I just loved this idea of non-superhero types having superpowers, and it was it was funny, and it was kind of wacky. They got around from place to place in an ice cream truck. That was the superhero mobile of the day, and I just enjoyed it. It was just lots of fun.
Nice. That's a good choice. Second in my list is Double Dare from Nickelodeon.
Oh, Nickelodeon!
Not the the more current ones, but the original Double Dare on Nickelodeon, where it was a game show, but this was the first time you ever saw on a game show where kids got splashed with food or soaked in green slime, and it was just goofy and cheesy, and sometimes they'd ask like the dumbest questions, and you're like, what in the world are like, why can't you answer this? These are simple questions, and the kids just, it astounded me. But at the same time, you loved to see them get soaked in slime. I mean, that was or have food come out of a pipe and land on them or get thrown at them, and it was just like, it was so cheesy. That's my number two.
Oh man, loved that show. Josh is going to be sad he missed this because he was closer to the age group for that audience than I was at the time.
Yeah.
And he ate that show up. Just loved it. Wouldn't be bad to mention You Can't Do That on Television. At this point,
that was
too,
a great
speaking
one too.
of Nickelodeon. But I wouldn't put that in either of these categories because it lasted for a number of seasons. It was actually a pretty successful show.
It definitely was, and a lot of great individuals came out of that. I mean, Alanis Morissette was one of the main characters on that. So, I watched that show a lot as well.
So my next one is The Powers of Matthew Starr. First of all, I love this because he's got a great name. You got to love Matthew. But it's got Louis Gossett Jr. He plays Walt Shepard, who is the guardian of Matthew Starr, played by actor Peter Barton, who was mainly a soap opera star at that point. He was one of those 80s pretty boy actors who was just too good looking to be real. And so they decided to give him his own TV show. It did not last long. But the idea was that Matthew Starr and Walt Shepard were from this other planet, and they had, and Matthew was a prince. He was of the royal line, and they had to hide him when the planet got invaded. And so they came to Earth, where he hides out and tries to be like a regular high school teenager. Only because he's an alien, he's got these amazing powers, generally revolving around telekinesis. But as the show goes on, they introduce additional powers that he gains as he goes through puberty and kind of grows up, and Walt helps train him and things like that. But it was just, I just loved it because some kid, you gotta realize this is Matthew, this is me, Matai, being a teenager, early teens, and here's this good-looking kid named Matthew who's got freaking superpowers, right? He can move things with his mind. He can astral project. He can speak telepathically with Walt. It was just so cool. All the different things he could do. Man, I wanted to be him so bad. I loved that show so much, and I completely understand if nobody else agrees with me. But I loved this show, but it was definitely cheesy. I actually went back and watched it. You can get all the episodes on YouTube. I went back and watched it a few years ago, and I'm like, I cannot believe I was so in love with the show. You look at it now, and every trope in the book is thrown into this TV show. It is there is nothing surprising in it, except it's kind of cool that he's got these powers. And 80s TV show level special effects, so nothing special there. But man, I just love the idea this guy had powers.
Nice, very nice. So number 3 on my list for cheesy, and I'm going here, I know a lot of people are going to be like shaking their head, but Droids. It was the
the Saturday morning cartoon
of Droids, which was George Lucas and Lucasfilm's attempt to put a cartoon out there because they didn't have any movies out at the time, but they're trying to play off the Star Wars popularity in the franchise. And we get this little cartoon series focused on 3CPO or C3PO. I keep getting those mixed up for some reason. I am so tired of that. But and R2. This is also one of the first times we ever see Boba Fett in this series. And he does not look like the Boba Fett we see in Empire Strikes Back and we see in later iterations of him. He's on this weird purple dinosaur type thing. But man, it was definitely an extremely cheesy cartoon show and not what you would expect from the world of Star Wars. If you look at Clone Wars and Rebels and some of the stuff that we're seeing nowadays, and you go back and look at the droids, you're just like, what was I smoking? I mean, we don't know what they were doing over at Lucasfilms other than trying to create something for kids to really hit that market. But it just, I feel like it just failed. It just wasn't one of those memorable ones. It was just so cheesy that I think everyone just said, all right, and hit click and turned off the TV.
After Ewok Adventure, they had to go someplace.
Yeah. Well, even the Ewoks cartoon. I mean, that's.
I think it was paired up with the Ewoks.
Yeah. It was just as bad, which is kind of funny because, while we're talking about this, Krebs earlier sent us a picture of like, hey, look what's on the wherever he's at in Jamaica's TV channel, and it was Ewoks, the Ewoks cartoon. So yeah.
Wow, I remember that show. Attentive listeners will remember that we did a Saturday morning cartoon lament several episodes back, where we talked about several of our favorite Saturday morning cartoons and how sad we are that today's kids don't get to have that experience of getting up early and making yourself a bowl of cereal so you can sit on the carpet in front of the TV set for the next 4 hours and just veg out on cartoons. Meanwhile, your parents got to sleep in. They liked having Saturday morning cartoons too. All right. Well, my next pick is Manimal. Anybody remember Manimal?
Oh
This,
yeah.
oh yeah, this was a British dude. Uh, Grows up in having traveled all around the world and learned the secrets of these different isolated tribes, and he can change into the form of various animals, a tiger, an eagle, or a hawk, something like
Mhm.
that. He had several different forms he could change into, and and they really tried to get the effects right, but they were on a limited budget, so they would do a transformation once and then reuse it every time he changed into that animal. One of the things that got my attention on it, besides the cool shape shifting concept, was that Melody Anderson was the love interest, and this time she was blonde, but she was also Dale Arden from the Flash Gordon movie.
Yeah.
And loved that movie. So I saw her on this. I had to watch the show. And then he changes into animals, and that's kind of cool. But man, this thing was so, the writing on it, it always strained believability. The
Mhm.
stories were always pretty weak. It's not a surprise this thing did not last very long. And it was incredibly cheesy. Mainly what it had going for it was what's his name? Peter York? I thought Michael York. I don't know. The guy who played it was British. He had a fantastic, refined British accent, and that really kind of added some charm to the show. And then, of course, they had the cool African American sidekick to add some comedy relief to this whole thing. So those three were the main stars of the show, and it was just a episode of the week kind of a thing. We got a problem, they come in, they solve it, they move on. Meanwhile, there's investigative reporters or law enforcement trying to track down how these mysterious animals keep appearing and disappearing. But I remember Manimal, man, that was kind of a cool show.
Yeah. All right. So next on my list, Max Headroom.
Oh,
It, you know, it was okay. Very interesting show, kind of ahead of its time with graphics and stuff like that. But the story is kind of weird. Where the main character is seriously injured by his corrupt employers, because he's a crusading reporter. He's kind of like Clark Kent but without superpowers. He then undergoes a procedure to digitize his mind into a computer program. And there was always the weird glitching and the talking patterns and everything. And he was able to move through computers and televisions and the network freely. But it was definitely a really cheesy show because I could never take, like, they try to have really serious drama parts, and when and you have Max talking, he's like, yeah, like we see in Back to the Future, where he kind of has the weird glitch, and then he finally talks through, and it always pulled me out of it, and it was just so cheesy seeing this guy in the computer. But now, looking back, like, that's almost reality. I mean, we almost have AI that can do that. We see a lot of TV series now where like Upload, where people, when they go to pass away, they actually they have their consciousness uploaded.
Yeah.
So at the time it was like a cheesy thing, but looking back at it, definitely doesn't stand the test of time. It was trying to be a serious drama, but just couldn't pull it off. It just seemed too cheesy.
I remember that show. I always had the hardest time trying to follow the storyline. And I
Yeah.
think one of the things it suffered from is it couldn't decide what it was. You're right.
Yep.
It tried to be serious, but Max Headroom was too funny.
Yeah.
It tried to be a science fiction show, but they never talked about the science. He just does things, and there's no consistency or rules that are it's literally Deus Ex Machina. There's a ghost in the machine, a literal ghost in the machine. Just does whatever the story needs him to do.
Yes.
And so I had a hard time following that series, but I remember that.
Yeah. So that's my number 2, working towards number 1.
All right. Well, my number 2 is Automan. And if you remember Automan, it was kind of again very short lived. I think the episodes were really expensive to make, but the main character is this detective, is more of an IT guy. And he's kind of a computer programmer, and it's played by Desi Arnaz Jr., who is the son of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. So he finally gets his own TV show, and then Automan, I'm sorry, let me explain this a little better. He creates this computer program, and because of a weird accident and a lightning bolt or something like that, the program he creates becomes self-aware and can project himself as a solid light hologram named Otto J. Man, or Automan. And it's kind of funny because he's who was it played by? Chuck Wagner. And if you look up, you'll recognize his face if you look him up on Google. He was a model, and he'd done a few bit parts in acting, but they wanted to put him in this, and he wore this suit that would glow and have weird kind of like Tron effects, but it had a lot of sparkly things like stars that would move kind of on his body. But he had Cursor, which was his tool, and it could change into a car or to a helicopter or to a boat. But he was affected by if there was enough power. If people were having brownouts or blackouts, Automan would get weak, and he could only be there as long as there was enough electrical power for all of this. But they'd go around solving crimes and taking out the mob and doing all this crazy stuff. It was completely unbelievable. And anybody who knows anything about computers, especially the computers of the 80s, knows that nothing like this would ever have been even close to possible. But it was kind of a neat concept in the age when everybody was thinking that computers were miracle machines. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the effects were cool. A lot of glowing blue stuff.
Yes. All right. So down to my number one most cheesy pick of this time frame. Kind of really fits, at least for me, it does. And that would be Gumby. It was an extremely cheesy animated cartoon. It definitely was claymation. But man, this thing did not take itself serious in any way, shape, or form. You were always wondering like where these storylines came from. Eyeballs popping out, limbs getting severed but reattached, and just weirdness. But the crazy thing is, I kept watching it. I would always come back to watch it. It was just so completely weird and strange, and yet fascinating and wonderful. But it holds the cheese factor for me the most out of all the shows I was looking through. It definitely was the cheesiest because there was no serious plot lines. There was no serious stories. It was just like, hey, let's try this idea out, and they do it, and then the next episode would because you generally got 2 or 3 different short stories within an episode, and it was completely different. And had nothing to do or wasn't even similar to the previous story that you just watched. So that's why I feel like it's the cheesiest of my picks.
Oh man, yeah, absolutely. Cheesy, a little doughy.
Oh yeah.
A little play-doughy.
It's really easy to squish and just walk all over.
Right. All right. Well, my number one most cheesy show I can think of from the 80s and 90s, Galactica 1980.
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh. They took this wonderful, amazing, groundbreaking show, Battlestar Galactica, the original here, folks. This is the original from 1978. And they decided to bring it back, but they didn't bring Glenn Larson. And they thought they could get along without him. Yeah, the only character who, well, I guess Adama carries over, but then they had Boxy. Boxy is now grown up, played by Kent McCord, and they got Barry Van Dyke to play the equivalent of Starbuck. He was Boxy's all serious, like Apollo was, and Barry Van Dyke's character is his partner, and
Yeah.
is kind of reckless like Starbuck was. But they didn't have the budget. They certainly didn't have the writers. The stories, the episodes were just, they were just dumb. They had flying motorcycles. They made it to Earth, but they couldn't land because the Cylons were following them, and they didn't want the Cylons to invade Earth. They had a bunch of Galactica children they brought down to the Earth, and they disguised as the equivalent of the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and but they could jump really high, as high as a tree, and they didn't understand that they were aliens and they had superpowers, and they couldn't show that off. And it was just, it just ruined what could have been. It was, if you're a fan of Battlestar Galactica, never watch Galactica 1980. It will ruin everything for you to see the costumes and the miniatures and the ships used in this fashion. It was just so bad, and bad in a cheesy way. They were trying to be sincere, and it just did not come across.
Yeah, I remember watching that show because I love Battlestar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seeing the Vipers zip through the sky, attacking the Cylons and everything, the long journey to get to Earth. When it first started, we didn't know it was Earth. But that's, at least when I was a kid, I didn't know that's where they were trying to get to. But watching this whole series and seeing these Cylons and these robots, and I even remember going to Universal Studios and seeing the Cylons there.
Oh yeah,
just like, oh my gosh, they're here. And having the red light zip back and forth, kind of like what Kit did. It was fascinating. It was wonderful. And then you see this show, and it's just like, what happened? Like, did you just give up? And because I remember watching it as a kid, like, this isn't Battlestar. What is this?
No.
But it sort of looks like it, but it's not. And it really was a disservice. And I feel like they just thought, hey, let's just throw in everything we can do. Let's make it as cheesy as we can. Well, what if we made them superheroes, but they can't show it, kind of like Clark Kent? All right, let's throw that in. What if we give them like super cool space bikes that they can ride around? All right, let's do that. It's like, but they got to Earth, but they can't go on Earth because the Cylons are still after them. All right, let's do that. It just seemed like they were just, everything was up for grabs, and there was no plot line. There was no no, we probably shouldn't do that. It was just like, yeah, let's do it all.
Glenn Larson had a story to tell with Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
The 1980 series was just they had to bring it back because the network was failing, and they were trying to get anything they could to air. And you did not have good writers. And you're right, they had no objective. They were trying to come up with some story, and I suspect they probably borrowed from a lot of other scripts or half-written scripts, and tried to just wrap it in a Battlestar Galactica theme and push it out.
Well, and not only that, you didn't even really have any tie back to the series. Like, Starbuck was gone. Apollo is gone. You had these new characters that you really didn't care about, and that was a huge problem. When you're gonna start a new series, that's something I really liked that CW did. We had the Arrow, and then they started the Flash, but the Flash kept showing up in the Arrow, so that you got used to that character. You knew that character.
Continuity.
There was continuity because, okay, we trust what they're doing with this character. We like this character, and now they're introducing a new one, and that slowly happened throughout the Arrowverse. And that was a formula they continued to do, and it worked really well. And I like that, and a lot of other shows have done that as well. But when you throw out something that is a continuation of something that was really popular, you need to have that cross connect, because if you don't, then people are just like, who are these people?
Yeah.
Why should I invest in these guys? I mean, I don't know them. I don't care about them. Yeah. And, and unfortunately, they made it even more cheesier and difficult to do that.
Well, do you have any honorable mentions on your cheesy list?
Oh, I've got several honorable mentions. Sabrina the Teenage Witch, followed by Clarissa Explains It All. Melissa Joan Hart in both of those. Really cheesy. For those that are that have seen the Sabrina the Teenage Witch dark, gritty drama on Netflix, the original one we saw was definitely not like that.
Nope.
It was goofy and silly. Very
It's a really
similar
bad
to
talking cat.
Yeah, horrible talking cat. It was cheesy. It just didn't. It really did not take itself seriously. The other one would be Rocco's Modern Life. I have no clue what that was. And then, of course, Cat Dog. Two cartoons there that just you didn't really know what was going on, and they were just extremely cheesy. I mean, seriously, a cat on one head and a dog on the other. I always ask the question, how does that thing go poop? It just made zero sense.
Someone's at the wrong end of that deal.
Yes. Yes.
Oh man. Well, I've only got a couple here. There are plenty more out there.
Oh yeah.
Perhaps our listeners can share in comments on Facebook or any of our other places that we post this. But one of them was Cop Rock, and that one did not get canceled fast enough. It was in an era where procedural dramas, cop shows were really, really popular. So somebody got the bright idea, let's do a cop drama, but we're going to put in current popular songs and actually have the actors sing and dance to it. And they were all just, out of work actors, up and comers. There weren't any real big stars at that time that were part of this. Some of them could sing, and there were others that might have been able to sing, might have been able to dance, and might have been able to act, but they definitely could not do them all at the same time. And it was just, the songs were so jarring. It didn't fit. They just popped up out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you've got somebody singing Elton John's I'm Still Standing while trying to dance down an escalator. And it just was so incredibly bad. I'm sorry, I'm spending too much time on this. Anyway, no, Cop Rock, if you guys know what I'm talking about, yeah, this one deserved to die. Another one was Super Force. And Super Force was a syndicated series about this. What I like about this one is it was set in the far off year of 2020. And this guy, astronaut, comes back from a mission to Mars to find that his family's been killed. He meets up with a buddy family friend who has this battle suit he's put together that basically just projects a force field that makes him invulnerable. And then he's got a bike with a motorcycle with a bunch of gadgets on it and things like that. And he decides to go out and be a vigilante named Super Force. Just from the name. I mean, how cheesy is the name? It's not even a force, a group of people. It's one person who has the hubris to call himself Super Force. And the actor in it is Ken Olant. And if you don't recognize that name, that's perfectly all right. Google him up and you will see, it's that guy. Because he was always that guy that showed up in every cheesy show from the 80s, 90s, and well into the 2000s as well. He was on Star Trek The Next Generation. He was Airwolf, Magnum PI. He was in a lot of different stuff. You've seen this guy. But yeah, it was a very cheesy, bad show. It barely made it to it was put in syndication. It didn't ever have a regular time slot, so it was really hard to find in the first place, but it didn't deserve a regular time slot.
Nice.
Now it's time to chat about our sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil is an award-winning world-building and writing software for people who love to create rich and exciting worlds. With their software, you can create your world, manage your campaign, plan your novel, create a world wiki, wow your players, make novels more interactive, and make your worlds come to life. You can find them at worldanvil.com, and if you put in the discount code DCR40, you will receive a 40% discount today.
So, did I tell you that I lost my job?
You lost your job? That's not good. What happened?
No, I got fired from my job at the keyboard factory. Apparently, I wasn't putting in enough shifts.
But
that's okay.
least it wasn't too many commands.
I was out of control all the time. But that's okay, because I really wanted to go work at the Mirror Factory instead. It was really the only place I could see myself working.
Yeah. What? Oh gosh. I was gonna say, why is that? But then my brain caught up. Oh my gosh.
Well, I didn't really want to tell any jokes about unemployment because none of them work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like saying I'm afraid for the calendar. That's because its days are numbered. Oh, wow. Those both went very well together. I will admit that.
Well, thank you.
All righty. So, again, yeah, folks, check out World Anvil, our new sponsor for the show. And again, they graciously gave us a discount for our listeners. So when you sign up, that's a 40% discount. It's been a great tool. I've really enjoyed it. So check them out. So the next round, TV series from the 80s and 90s that we thought ended too soon, that we wish would have stuck around for a little bit longer. Since I went first last time, how about you go first?
Okay. I didn't really have these in any particular order. But let's start with Street Hawk. I just mentioned Superforce a minute ago. Street Hawk is what Superforce wishes it could be. And Street Hawk was mainly about the main part about Street Hawk was a souped up motorcycle that had all kinds of gadgets and stuff in it. But it was this police officer who used to be a motorcycle racer, and it starred Rex Smith, who was a famous singer, pop star, and actor of the day. But he was Jesse Mock. In fact, I'll read to you the intro. An ex-motorcycle cop injured in the line of duty, now a police troubleshooter. He's been recruited for a top secret government mission to ride Street Hawk, an all-terrain attack motorcycle designed to fight urban crime, capable of incredible speeds up to 300 miles an hour and immense firepower. Only one man, Federal Agent Norman Tuttle, knows Jesse Mock's true identity: the man, the machine, Street Hawk. It was another. It was definitely cheesy, but they actually had a long way they could have gone with this show. And the acting was pretty decent. The writing wasn't bad. There was some real stakes involved. Can he make it to the garage and get on the bike soon enough? Sometimes he gets knocked off the bike. Is he any good without the motorcycle there? And usually it's not. Computer assisted driving, so he can go 300 miles an hour down urban streets and not crash and die. But it was definitely, in comparison to Superforce, Street Hawk was the more interesting show, and I would have wanted to see where they were taking the story and what more they could do with the bike and the characters. They started bringing in more and more interesting characters, so I really liked it.
Nice, good choice. Kind of funny, you mentioned this earlier in cheese, where we're talking about our cheese, but one of the series that I really feel like went before its time was the TV series Airwolf. I love that. That theme song. I
can listen that and the Knight Rider theme are ones I can just listen to over and over again.
Jan Michael Vincent and who's the other guy?
Ernest Borgnine.
Ernest Borgnine. It was such a great show, and you had this iconic helicopter, and when it would, they'd be fighting, you hear the whoa sound or whatever. I probably butchered that. It was just so amazing and cool. And then suddenly Jan Michael Vincent was gone, and then Ernest Borgnine was gone, and they replaced it with this other crew, and it ended. It disappeared. I wish
Barry Van Dyke showing up once again.
Yeah, I wish they would have kept the original sauce, because once they changed it, it just lost it. It died. It went too soon. And I'm sure, and I know there was some sort of legal matters or something that with Jen Michael Vincent, but it just was a show that had so much promise, and it was well written up until that point. And then after that, it just kind of fizzled. It was gone and horribly done after that.
Oh man, but I loved Airwolf. Just the combat scenes were pretty well done. Yeah, it probably doesn't stand up now. They reused a lot of footage. You saw the same thing happening over and over, but it was written into the story and you believed it. And yeah, the sound effects, the helicopter just looked so cool.
Oh yeah.
You know, oh man. And you knew things were about to get real when the theme song picked up and you heard that growl of the helicopter as it took off at super speed. Oh my gosh, it was amazing.
Well, I mean, it just had some really good shots. I mean, yes, they reused quite a bit, but when the theme song kicked in and whatever that plateau was, and you see the helicopter rise up out of it, you knew stuff was gonna happen.
Yeah.
But even though it was based around a helicopter, there was still a lot of really cool writing and things that happened outside of the helicopter. So it wasn't always just two dudes flying around in a helicopter. And not only that, Ernest Borgnine was still, really late in his years. He wasn't trim, he wasn't fit, he was kind of a portly guy. And they still made that work. And it wasn't like, everyone has to be, buffed up and muscular guys. These are two dudes that were in a helicopter. It didn't matter what their physical fitness looked like. They would just need to be on their toes and really good at their jobs. And that's something that I really liked about the series as well. Because, as much as I loved Knight Rider, David Hasselhoff was always ripped. And there's quite often you saw him without his shirt on, and it was like, and he was hairy. We'll just put it up.
Yeah, it was popular in the 80s.
It was, but I would see that and I'm like, is that normal? Is that real? But then I see this and see Ernest Borgnine. I'm like, oh yeah, I have an uncle that's that way. That seems real to me. So that was one thing I enjoyed about it.
Well, my next one was Voyagers. And I liked this so much. It was a time traveling show. Phineas Bogg, played by model pretty boy actor John Eric Hexum, is a time traveler. He uses this little device called an Omni, which looks kind of like a pocket watch. You can flip it open and a light flashes red if history is wrong, and it flashes green if history is right. And it's his job. He's part of the Voyagers, this group of people that travel through time and give history a push to kind of keep it on track. It kind of reminds me of Loki with the sacred timeline. They're trying to preserve the sacred timeline without the bombs that blow everything up. And he accidentally time travels to 1982, where he meets Jeffrey Jones, played by Mino, and I'm going to butcher this, Mino Pellucci, who's the cousin of Punky Brewster, Soleil Moon Frye. But he was in several different kid shows back then. But Phineas Bogg does not know history. He's more of a womanizer. And the reason that he keeps jumping randomly to different times is he lost his instruction manual. He left his guidebook back at Voyager's headquarters, and now he can't get back. But Jeffrey Jones, this teenager, knows history really, really well. And so the two of them pair up and they travel through time, and Jeffrey Jones tells them what's wrong in this timeline, and the two of them work together to try and fix it. One of my favorite episodes was when they came across Thomas Edison, and he took apart the Omni, and he's like, oh no, I'll never get back. And he says, no, there was a blinking light. How did you make that light? And because he's Thomas Edison, he's able to reassemble the device when he's done, and they help him create the electric light, and history is back on course again. Nice. But anyway, that was one of the things I like about that. John Eric Hexum, you may remember, was in another series right after this, I think, Silk Stockings or something like that, and he was playing around with a prop gun that had blanks in it, and he knew it had blanks in it. He was doing some Russian roulette game, and he pulled the trigger with it against his head, thinking that it's blanks, it couldn't hurt him. But the concussion blast hit his temple and injured his brain and killed him.
Uh,
That's one of those stories of why you don't play with guns. Alec Baldwin. You don't play with them, you take them seriously, right?
Yeah. Well, and that must have been a theme in the 80s, losing the instruction booklets. Because for those of you that don't remember the classic,
I think you're going to steal mine.
Maybe I'll back off if that.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's not one of mine. So if that is, we'll hold off. But there was definitely a superhero TV series that character lost the instruction booklet. So I'll circle back if you don't mention it. But my next one in line, I'm going to go back to a cartoon because this one was a huge bitter disappointment. And this one is Dungeons and Dragons. We will never know if those poor kids ever make it back home.
I love you for choosing this one.
It was a great cartoon series. I still have it. It was great. Peter Cullen did the voice of Venger, the bad guy in this film. Which was when I first was watching it, I'm like, wait a minute, that's Optimus Prime. That's what that. Wait a minute, he can't be the bad guy. But yeah, it was Peter Cullen doing the voice of Venger. It was going on around the same time as Transformers, so it was definitely in his heyday. Great stories. It was kind of the first time I'd ever heard about Dungeons and Dragons, and it was a good cartoon. It was definitely cheesy. It's a cartoon. It wasn't taking itself seriously, but it never finished, and the kids never got back home. And so we're all left wondering if they ever made it back to Earth because they went on some really horrible roller coaster ride that ended them somewhere crazy land, and they met the Dungeon Master. And as we all know, Dungeon Masters are horrible and mean and notorious for taking their players to somewhere they never want to go. Yeah.
Oh man, I love that. I've got the cartoons on DVD as well. I showed it to my kids, and even they loved it. It was so great. That series was actually continued in comic book form in the 2000s.
No, I wasn't aware of that. So
I just found out about that a little while ago. So that might be worth looking up. But that's that. If you ask me what my favorite cartoon was from Saturday morning, Dungeons and Dragons.
Very nice.
Love it. All right. Well, my number 3, it was a short-lived series called The Phoenix. And it stars Judson Scott, who's another name you probably don't recognize, but it's a face you've seen in every science fiction series you've ever watched. So Google Judson Scott, and you'll know who I'm talking about. But he is an extraterrestrial being named Bennu of the Golden Light, and he was buried in a sarcophagus in Peru 40,000 years ago. He's an ancient alien, and he's awakened to a modern Earth in the 80s and has to travel to find out where his mate is. His mate's sarcophagus had been moved by that point, and he's trying to find where she's at. Meanwhile, there's an antagonist, another alien named Yago, his arch nemesis, that seeks to destroy him. What's cool about Bennu is that he had this Phoenix amulet that could draw power from the sun, and he had all kinds of paranormal abilities, like telekinesis, telepathy, astral projection. It kind of sounds a little bit like the powers of Matthew Starr, but I just loved this. He was a peaceful, non-confrontational person, but then if you tried to get in his way, he'd use his superpowers and kick your butt. But it was apparently this, and I was too young to realize this at the time, but the series was influenced strongly by the book Chariots of the Gods, which was a popular book from the 70s that claimed ancient aliens had visited Earth and influenced the development of several civilizations and cultures. So if you ever hear anything about how aliens created the Egyptian pyramids and stuff, or the Mayans and the Incans and influenced their culture, that comes from this book, Chariots of the Gods. And so Bennu kind of was supposed to, there was a lot of Egyptian symbology that was surrounded Bennu, and that's kind of where that came from. And it was a story arc, which was very uncommon for the 80s. All the TV shows were always self-contained episodes. And this was more of, we're going to do a self-contained episode, but there's also an arc in there if he's looking for his mate and he's being chased by this bad guy, and that was a continuous running theme, and there was progress made. I like that he was a drifter. He'd go from one place to another, help somebody in the new town, and then move on to the next town, right? So that was pretty tropey. That was just a normal way they would frame a lot of TV shows. But I loved that the story was continuing, and I wanted to know how it ended. I wanted to know how he eventually found his wife, and the showdown with Yago and all the and I love that he had powers. I still like TV shows that have got these really cool superpowers. And he was solar powered. During the day he would just sit out there almost like sunbathing, but he was absorbing the sun's energy so he could use it later on. It was a great show. I loved it, and it was gone too soon.
Nice. Well, I mean, since we're talking about superheroes, I'll jump to my next one, which is The Flash from the 90s.
Oh yeah,
John Wesley Ships.
Yeah,
that they brought back into the the newer Flash series and made him what was his name, the older Flash, something Garrett. Gosh dang it, my brain is just,
it was the Golden Age Flash dude, right?
Yes, it was the Golden Age
Had
Flash.
The Mercury helmet.
Yeah,
meaning helmet like the god Mercury. My son loves the current Flash series, and I was walking by one time and I saw John Wesley Shipp up there, and I'm like, dude, did you know that old guy right there? He was the original Flash in this old. Blew my son's mind. He's like, whoa, it's like Flashception.
Yeah, I mean, he played Barry Allen. It only lasted a season, but it was really well done. In my opinion, it was probably one of the better Flash suits we've ever seen.
Yeah,
it's and it kind of had a velvety look, but even though it was during the 90s when we didn't have all these fancy CGI and all these great computer graphics, they did a great job with it. We also had some really fun villains, like the Trickster, as Mark Hamill being him. And this was just prior to him being casted as the Joker, I believe, in the Batman animated series. So it was a great series. It definitely was gone before its time, because we had some good. Again, it was a superhero film. It definitely was, the issue of the week, villain of the week type theme going on, and but they had some really good stories. It was during that same era as Lois Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, so they were definitely trying to expand on that. So John Wesley Shipp played Henry Allen, so Barry's dad, and then came back and played another person. Man, I just got sidetracked because I saw that, but then I missed it. But either way, it was nice that they brought him back in the new Flash series.
That was a great series. When that came out, I remember seeing the commercials for it, and I got so excited because you didn't have a lot of superhero TV shows on, and I've always been a comic book nerd, so when I saw that, I was excited to watch it. And then when the Flash suit was comic book accurate, I went crazy. It was just amazing. Now I'm trying to remember the timing of things. Was that before or after Tim Burton's Batman came out? I think it was after.
Let me just double check. Batman, Tim Burton.
1989 was when the
so Batman came out in 89. The Flash TV series was 1990.
Yeah, so we had just had this really great Batman movie, and with and again, the costumes really are a part of it, because if you go totally spandex and colorful like the comics, it's just hard to take it seriously on the screen. Comic books are fine, but on the screen, it just doesn't always work too well. But Batman's got a plain black costume, so that one
Yeah.
translated great. And so then they bring in the Flash, and again they're staying accurate to the costume
Yeah.
in the comic books. And I think that, for me at least, the excitement that I gained from the first Batman movie carried over into this series, and I really liked it. It really
Yeah.
fulfilled a need I had.
So the Flash character, Jay Garrick, it finally popped into my head. That's the other,
that's right.
the other version of him. But so the one thing I liked about the costume in this series is it wasn't the very vibrant red, the bright red. It was definitely more of a muted red, but it was still scarlet red. It still worked. You know, we still had a good, strong Barry Allen that was smart. We got to see the cop side, you know, the criminal investigator side of him. And we got to see, you know, the Scarlet Speedster, and they did a good job in doing that with the technology they had at the time. And they delivered good, solid superhero stories. I just wish that it would have been able to last more than one season. And it was definitely before its time. You know, even though we had the Batman movie, I don't think everyone was ready for superheroes. Superman was okay at the time because we've had several Superman TV series.
And shortly after this, she had Lois and Clark, the New Adventures of Superman.
Yeah, we had that, and then we also had Superboy. So we had a few things.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it just came out a little too early.
Mm-hmm. Well, great pick. That was a great pick. All right, so my number 2 on my list, and if you recognize this title, I hope everybody will go "ah" with me. Wizards and Warriors. I loved this show because it had some humor. It was a great fantasy, swords and sorcery kind of a thing. And the cast, man, nobody knew where these people were going to go with their careers, but the cast was amazing. You had Jeff Conaway as Valiant Prince Eric Greystone, Walter Olkowicz, which is another name that you probably don't recognize, but you've seen him and stuff. He was Marco, Eric Greystone's companion and the strongest man in the kingdom. Duncan Regehr. Oh, he's one like Alan Rickman, where he can play anything that he's in is worth watching. He was the evil Prince Dirk Blackpool, who wanted to take over the kingdom. Julia Duffy was the beautiful Princess Ariel. Clive Revel, he's a classically trained actor. He was the evil wizard Vector. Then you had the witch Bethel. You had the good wizard Tranquil. There was, a lot of different characters in this cast, but some of these, like, you probably recognize some of those names of the actors. And it was, again, the stories were great. There was a good balance of comedy and action. You cared about these characters. I showed the first couple of episodes because I also have this one on DVD. It was very hard to find, but I got it. I showed the first couple of episodes to my kids, and Blackpool has his catchphrase. He'll enter a room and he'll do something terrible. Like, he'll walk in and just kill somebody. And then he goes, "Hi." And that's it. It's like, it's just terribly understated, but it's brilliant. And they love that. After seeing that episode, every time that they would enter the room, they would just give me an evil look, and they'd go, "Hi." Like, that was their grand entrance. But I loved this, and there was so many more stories to tell, but it was a mid-season replacement. It got canceled at the end of its short run. I would have loved to have seen more. I can watch these over and over. The special effects are terrible. The costumes, they have little lizard men. I mean, you can see the zippers sometimes on the lizard man costumes. It is really not great in that regard, but I didn't care. I just loved the stories, and I loved the characters and watching them do their thing. And I loved them enough to suspend my disbelief. And that was definitely put to the challenge more than a few times. But I just absolutely loved this series. That's another one you can also catch most of those episodes on YouTube as well. But I recommend the DVDs because the YouTube video transfers are terrible. DVDs definitely much better.
Nice. All right, my number 2 pick would be Alf. It was a great series. You had the puppet from Melmac that loved to eat cats because apparently it's a delicacy, but that's against the rules here. You had Max Wright playing Willie Tanner. You had the Tanner family that he was living with, but because he crash landed into their garage, and they were keeping him a secret. And we never really the series ended too soon. It definitely, we never found out if he went back home or not. It was crazy how well that they could do a sitcom where the main character really never left the house. And there was always so much going on in each episode that was entertaining and fun, but you never left the house. I mean, and it wasn't until years later that we saw other sitcoms that did really well with this type of formula, like Friends. We rarely ever saw them outside of their apartments. Seinfeld was very similar to that. A lot of that was done in the apartments, but with Seinfeld, we still kind of traveled away. But I was always excited to see the next episode. I was always glued to see what was going to happen next. Was he going to eat the cat? What insanity was going to happen next? Because sometimes he just randomly started building stuff like ET. Trying to be able to contact Melmac and get a ride back home. And it even spun up a small little cartoon series for a bit. But it definitely was one that and we've seen Alf pop up a couple times in some commercials and things like that. I don't know if the series would do very well now, but it would be interesting if they did a kind of a we've seen it with several other shows where they've kind of gone back years later. It'd be interesting to go back years later and see if the formula of Alf still works. Like Quantum Leap, they've got a new Quantum Leap show going on right now, which is a continuation of the original story. And they're looking for Sam Beckett that's been lost in time. It's interesting.
I think they just canceled that TV show.
Okay, well, I know they just released new episodes, but we'll see. The biggest problem is if they did cancel it, they're not getting to the plot point, which is they're hinting at trying to find Sam Beckett, but we're not having any clues popping up. That's what I'm thinking up there. But this one was definitely,
you got to give him a little something.
Yeah, this one was definitely Alf was definitely one that was cut too soon, which is really surprising. Especially considering that the guy who played Willie Tanner, Max Wright, hated this show. He's talked about how he hated it because coming on, he was like the big name. He was kind of the big name actor, and this as he's put it, the stupid puppet got more attention than me. Well, I mean, when it's a show called Alf based around the alien, you got to kind of figure that's who everyone's going to gravitate towards. Plus, I got to put it this way, the alien puppet was more funny than Max Wright was. He was definitely a very straight-laced dad, which I appreciate, because I really hate now where most dads are portrayed as a bumbling idiot. He definitely wasn't. He had his moments, but a lot of the times he had some really good, solid moments that he showed up as a dad. He also showed up to help Alf and various other things. So I do appreciate his portrayal in that series.
Max Wright also was the administrator who was always worried about the budget in Misfits of Science.
Oh, yeah.
So he was in that show too. All right, for me, my number one show that was gone too soon, and I think this is the one that you were alluding to earlier, Daniel. Believe it or not, it's The Greatest American Hero.
Oh, yep. That's why I'm like, I'm gonna hold off. That is the one. He loses his instruction booklet.
Yep, loses the instruction booklet twice.
Yep.
And he doesn't know how to work the super suit, and he has to kind of figure it out, and flying is not one of his talents. Loved that show. Starred William Catt, Robert Culp, uh, Connie Selica,
Yeah.
and Mr. Hinckley, high school teacher, is chosen by aliens to receive the suit that gives him superpowers so that he can do good on the earth. Robert Culp is an FBI agent by the book, who's going to help him find things to do. And Mr. Hinckley is more of a liberal, coming from a hippie culture, I think, kind of a background. Robert Culp is the conservative USA, older guard kind of a person. And Connie Selica was just sweet and nice.
Yes.
She kind of added the heart and compassion to the whole thing. Loved this. William Catt came to Salt Lake FanX a couple years ago, got to see his panel and talk with him a couple of times. I would have loved to have, if we had the microphones then, I would have loved to have set him down for an interview and talk for a little bit. Really had a great time at his panel. He shared some of the behind the scenes things there, and what it was like working with Robert Culp and going through this series and stuff. It was, loved the show so much. Another show that had a fantastic theme song. It actually placed on the charts as a single on the radio. It got played back then. This was what, 1983, 1981. It started out in 1981 and it ran until 83. Had 2 seasons out of it. If you get the DVD, you will also get to watch the unaired pilot of The Greatest American Heroine, which was supposed to be a spin-off series where they choose an altruistic young woman and she gets to have the suit after Hinckley's identity is exposed and he's no longer able to continue being the greatest American hero because of all the publicity and popularity. So they hand it off to somebody else. And I'm thinking, if your secret identity was that important, why didn't the super suit come with a mask? For heaven's sake, people.
Yeah. It works for Green Lantern.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I loved this show. Did you remember that show, Daniel?
Oh, I of course. I mean, I have the theme song on my phone. It was a great show, and it showed that even when you had superpowers, you could still be the hero and be kind of a bumbling fool. Now, he wasn't an idiot. He wasn't a bumbling idiot. But he was doing, he got this powers because of this, and he felt compelled to step up and be a hero. And I mean, watching him fly was always just like crazy because he couldn't fly. And and this is also after Superman, with Christopher Reeves have come out. We've seen this, blue and red spandex on the guy, and he's flying like Superman. And then you have, Mr. Hinckley in his really red tight spandex suit, and he goes to take off for the first time and can't. And he can't fly. And it's like, what the heck? I'm supposed to be able to do this. And then when he finally figures out how to fly, it's so maddening and crazy that he's not flying straight. It's not perfect. But that was the really cool thing, is watching him evolve as this superhero. And even though he's lost the book, he doesn't know how to do this, but he's figuring it out by trial and error. And, you've got Robert Culp helping him out, and Connie Selica being, like you said, the heart. She's kind of the heart that guides him, that helps him along this path. And then you've got the old guard that's like, it's kind of like Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. You got to do this, kid. And, I'm going to help you out type thing. And I love Robert Culp as an actor. Fantastic. I love the stuff he's been in, but this was just fun because it really looked like he was having fun in this role.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember there was an episode that was Dungeons and Dragons themed?
Yeah.
The kids had this game called Wizards and Warlocks, and they kind of got into it, but it was basically Dungeons and Dragons. They were just, and a little bit of LARPing thrown in for fun.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Wizards and Warlocks actually was a game.
If it is, I wasn't familiar with it.
No, maybe it isn't. Maybe it was just that, and they were trying to play off it and not get copyright infringement and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, great show, great pick for number one. Definitely died off too soon. And again, I think it was trying to write off the popularity of Superman, but it was just too soon. We weren't in the era of superheroes like we are now.
No.
All right. So my number one pick, and I love this show. The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr.
Oh my gosh. I have never seen that, but everybody who's watched it told me it's the best show ever.
Well, I own it on DVD. If you need to borrow it.
I was out of the country when that aired.
Yeah. Very short-lived. It's a Weird West is the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Weird West is a Western with paranormal and fantasy elements in it. This definitely fits that. Starring Bruce Campbell as Briscoe County Jr.
Can't go wrong there.
Can't go wrong there. And it felt like a mixture of Indiana Jones and a Western. It really did. You had this orb that he was trying to hunt down because his father, Briscoe County Sr., had been killed. And, he kind of steps in, and you've got these crazy characters that are romping around with him. And it was just so much fun. I really enjoyed it, but it ended way too soon, which was too sad. I would have really liked to see Bruce Campbell really take this character on. And we know Bruce Campbell's got the acting chops. He's gone a long way from where he started with Evil Dead and some of these other stuff that he was in. But man, I always go back. I always levitate back to that series. If I just want something fun to watch and I don't really need to invest anything, that's the first thing that goes into my DVD player to watch. It's just, you can't go wrong. It's just silly. It's goofy. And but I don't know how it ends. It's another one of those shows that, it was canceled before they could even write an ending, it's frustrating when that would happen. At least nowadays, they kind of get at least enough heads up that they can kind of write an ending for a show. But this one is one of those ones that just never got a proper ending because it ended on a cliffhanger and then it was canceled. So, oh well, it happens.
Well, that was a great pick. Yeah, I would. That's a show I would go back and watch again.
Yeah, it definitely is worth it. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else.
And if any of our fans, our listeners, are wondering why we didn't mention Firefly, it's because that didn't come out till the 2000s. This is just 80s and 90s.
Yes. Yeah. So, for those of you that want to take a look into this, Briscoe County is a Harvard-educated lawyer who decides he doesn't like practicing law, and becomes a bounty hunter because his dad's was killed by the main villain. And he has his sidekick Lord Bowler and his trusty horse Comet. So it's a very tongue-in-cheek series. It's set in 1893. It was really, really fun to watch. Billy Drago played John Bly, which is the main bad guy. John Austin was in it. So those of you that don't know who that is, that was the original Gomez Addams from the Addams family. There were so many great characters and people that were in that series. So,
and you get Sam Raimi directing and stuff. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, and that was the thing. It was two friends really coming together to make this TV series, which those two together just seem to really have fun and create really great things. Which is why I think anytime Sam Raimi does anything, we continue to see Bruce Campbell show up. I mean, Pizza Papa. Who doesn't love Pizza Papa?
I know, right?
Yeah. Or all the other various characters that Bruce Campbell has played. I mean, every Sam Raimi Spider-Man, Bruce Campbell's a different character in that. You know, it's almost like Bruce Campbell's a watcher, like Stan Lee, but that's okay.
Well, that's great. I think we had some good picks in here. I'm curious what our listeners have to say. What series did we leave off our lists? Is there something that you remember fondly? Is there something that gives you lactose intolerance for all the cheese that you remember? Share those with us. We'd love to go back down memory lane with you on these old TV shows.
Yeah. So with that, folks, you know, continue to check us out. We've got some great episodes on the way. Like you said, our next episode, we will be with author Brandon Sanderson to talk about The Lost Metal, his secret project #1. And we'll talk about some writing and other really great things with him that's going on in the world of Sanderson. But not only that, I do believe there was a recent book by him and Dan Wells that just came out recently that maybe we'll even be able to talk to about. Oh man, I believe it just came out on January 10th. I'm just looking it up now, and it is nope. I guess it's not. If it is, I can't find it. But we'll talk to him. We'll find out what's going on in the world of Brandon Sanderson, as well as talk about the final chapter of Wax and Wane in the Mistborn series. We know Mistborn is not done. It's only phase 2 of this world. There's 2 more phases to come. Well, you know, maybe we'll see what the next phase will be like. You know, we're probably not going to get exact details, but at least we'll have an idea of where he's going next and see what else is coming. If there's more Stormlight archives or other worlds in the Cosmere that we may be discovering. So with that said, everyone, we'll catch you next time.
Let your geek flag fly, so say we all. And Daniel, we're missing our big outro.
And remember to be epic and don't suck.
Remember, the Force will be with you always.